Tougher immigration enforcement by the federal government has prompted many faith leaders and activists to ask for limiting cooperation by state and local authorities in Massachusetts. Their legislative agenda was outlined in the Safe Communities Act, which had support from the state Senate, but the provisions were eventually dropped in the final budget approved by the House of Representatives. Meanwhile, advocates plan to continue their campaign. We'd like to welcome one of them, the Director of Communications for the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy, or MIRA Coalition, Marion Davis. Thank you very much for being with us, Marion.
Thank you so much for having me.
Marion, why is this so important to pass, especially for the immigrants and their communities?
So we've been talking a lot about family separations at the border, and that's most dramatic because, it happens right, at the border, children torn apart. But family separations are happening in Massachusetts every day. People are being arrested by ICE on the basis of sometimes no offense whatsoever. It's just they had overstayed their visa, or they come to knock on the door looking for somebody else. They find an undocumented person there. They take them. So there's a lot of people who are being separated from their children by ICE every day here. And our police are used to help with that all the time. And the way that it happens is because of federal law. We have the system called Secure Communities, where every time that somebody is arrested by the police, the information goes directly to ICE, and it goes into a federal database that ICE can access. And if ICE sees somebody that matches a record of somebody they're interested in, they'll just come and pick him up. And but it also happens that a lot of the time, police will call ICE and say, we have one of yours here, come and get him. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that, we can't stop the data sharing, can't stop ICE from doing its job. And, they're a legitimate agency until the laws change. But we don't want police to be actively used for this. And the other thing that happens is if people have the sense that police are going to call ICE on them, then they don't just get scared if they commit a crime or something like that. They get scared if they're crime victims or if they are witnesses. They don't want to be anywhere near police because they're afraid that if the police encounter them, they're going to call ICE.
Well, one thing you wanted to preclude through the Safe Communities Act was a situation where an immigrant, whatever their status is, comes in and reports a crime to the police, and the police ask that person about what their immigrant status is. So has that actually happened in Massachusetts?
We had an intern who is a dreamer. She lives in Metro West in Framingham, and this was a few years ago. It wasn't like right away, but she was telling us about how her dad's car got broken into once, and when they called the police officer looked at them, and they're brown-skinned Brazilians, and he said, "Are you illegals? Don't ever bother us again. Go away or I'll report you." And for many, many years after that, the entire family was terrified of having any contact, not just with police, but going to City Hall, going to anything that could be official, because they thought that they were going to have the same thing happen to them.
Now, take me into the mind of an immigrant, whether they're unauthorized or not. Just the notion that police could do that if they wanted to. How important is that?
It sends a terrible message. It's like, imagine if, you called the police to report that your house is getting broken into, and they said, are you white? Or are you, whatever. It's like, it sends the message that it is a test. Are you here? Are you a U.S. citizen, or are you documented, is the test for whether we care about what is happening to you.
Well, one of the concerns that the governor raised last year, and I know this is for some changes in the Safe Communities Act, he was saying that this would prevent police from handing over people who really should be handed over because they're dangerous or even involved in terrorism. What would you say to that?
First of all, nothing in the Safe Communities Act, nothing in the provisions that were included in the budget would prevent the police from collaborating with federal authorities on criminal matters. And if somebody's wanted for terrorism, that's a criminal offense. So that's really not a factor here. The people that become an issue where there's a distinction here is when the only thing that ICE wants them on is a civil offense, because otherwise they can get an arrest warrant. And if you only want somebody on a civil offense, that is not something the police have any business getting involved in. ICE can still do its job in other ways. They can still pick up people. We have stopped objecting. We had originally in the Safe Communities Act wanted to eliminate all collaboration agreements between sheriffs and police departments and the Department of Corrections with ICE, where they voluntarily hand off people. We have when the provision was included in the budget, we specifically carved out the Department of Corrections, because those are people where, if somebody has just served out a felony sentence, okay, we'll grant that to the governor. We don't necessarily agree that it's due process, but we understand that there's a graver concern about public safety there. But in other cases, a lot of the people who pass through police stations, a lot of the people who pass even through county jails are there for minor things. It just happened to be that it was a Friday night, or it just happened to be that it was a Saturday. And many of them will not actually be ever convicted of any crime, but if they're plucked right out of the system and put in an ICE jail, they're never coming out.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Marion Davis from the MIRA Coalition. Marion, we usually in our shorthand talk about the Safe Communities Act as helping unauthorized immigrants, but this is supposed to help communities. How does this help other people in those communities?
Well, you and I both have light skin. I do not look visibly Latina, but I am Latina. If I had brown skin, I just took a lift and I was with a Dominican man with brown skin, and we were actually talking about racism. His wife was Puerto Rican. She's a U.S. citizen. But because of her skin color, because of her last name, she is as likely as anybody else to be treated as an illegal. And racial profiling happens to people, to brown people, or people who happen to speak a foreign language in public or anything like that. It happens all the time. So when police start asking immigration questions, they don't just ask those questions of undocumented immigrants, they ask them of everybody. And they're really, it can really lead to profiling, and it can lead to very bad situations of discrimination. And the other thing that this does, the other reason why we don't want police to get entangled in immigration matters is because crime victims, if they are not reporting crimes, those criminals are going free. So, if the person has, say a woman gets raped, if she doesn't report that rape because she's scared of the police, that guy may go and rape 3 other women. And that could have been prevented if she had reported that crime, but she was too scared. Or if you are, if you're mugged on the street and the only witness is an undocumented immigrant, that immigrant is not going to want to come forward. The person who mugged you is never going to be brought to justice.
I have to ask you about the politics here, because even if you do get something in the near future to have this passed by the state legislature, it goes to the governor's desk. The governor, I don't think he's going to sign it. I mean, so are they going to be able to overturn the veto?
So that was the main argument given by House leaders on why they didn't want to pass these provisions, because they felt that the governor would veto it and they would not be able to override it. We believe that we can actually build consensus around a lot of these things. One of the provisions, for example, was providing due process. The most basic thing that when you are in when you're at the police station and an ICE agent walks in and says, I want to interview that guy, that you tell the person you have the right to remain silent and you have the right to call a lawyer. Basic know your rights things. We believe that that should be the law of the land, and we don't believe that that is a controversial thing.
Another provision here was to preclude having a Muslim registry in Massachusetts. Trump has talked about this. Maybe it's just pandering. So why have this in there?
That was one of the things that the bill sponsor, Senator Eldridge, felt strongly about including as well. This was when the whole campaign started, this was a big rallying issue for a lot of the groups that supported this, especially, Jewish community, Muslim community. There were other people who felt like discrimination on the basis of nationality or ethnicity or religion is a very, very real thing. So far, we haven't seen efforts to create any kind of Muslim registry or any other something like that, but that was just a provision to say, if it ever comes to this, Massachusetts will not collaborate.
Well, I know there's not much time for anything to advance in the legislature right now, but so what's your plan for the near future on this?
So we are going to be at the State House tomorrow. We're going to actually be, the House will be in session, and we hope to be seen and remind them that this is still an urgent matter. They still have until midnight on Tuesday. We don't know whether they will do anything. We hope that they will find it in their hearts to include at least that Know Your Rights provision or something, because we believe that for immigrants, they don't have another year. If this isn't passed by Tuesday night, it won't pass until at least the fall of next year, and that's too long for people to wait.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Marion Davis on the MIRA Coalition.